Hello everyone, welcome back. This is Avorion episode 67. I'm Enigmius and today we're continuing with the Chariot carrier build. Very strange things happening. And in this case, you can see we're doing basically what I said in the last episode we would be doing, which is finishing off the sides of these sections, the profile that we built on the front end of the ship, and then we copied and pasted it on the back portion of the ship. After rescaling it, we had to finish closing them in so that they look like they're finished, because up until now they've just been a side profile. They haven't been a completed shape. And in this case, in addition to matching the profile of the shape, we also have to make sure that we have an opening for the hangers, because otherwise they're not going to work. Pretty straightforward task. Realistically, all we're doing is duplicating the profile with interior corner blocks and exterior corner blocks to create sort of a soft curve coming off the main shape of the profile, just to kind of give it a little bit of a refined detail instead of cutting it off at 90 degrees. Very straightforward approach. I do this for a lot of different things. I'm not opposed necessarily to 90-degree transitions. I just find in a lot of cases we can do a little bit of extra effort and end up with a more refined sort of finished product. The issue that I encountered is that as I was working around this profile and kind of placing the blocks and doing what should have been a very straightforward task, I noticed that with many of the blocks, in this case specifically most of the blocks, there was a hairline gap from one row to the next, or one column to the next. And it was rampant. It was everywhere. And I was trying to figure out what I could have done that would create that kind of a problem. It shouldn't have been that big of a deal. Of all of the things that I've done in the past, creating a profile like this and then refining it with the curves and the things, I've never encountered this, and it took me a while to figure it out. In the process of rescaling this profile, the sizing went out of alignment for the various different pieces that we were working with, and consequently, in trying to get everything to line up and placing blocks side by side with one another, we ended up with these very consistent hairline gaps. And I know that this playback speed is a little bit too fast necessarily for you to be able to see them clearly. You might be able to see them, but one way or the other, I can assure you that they're there. And I decided that I would just kind of push through. It was obvious to me that it wasn't the kind of thing that I was going to be able to fix. Before I'd even figured out what was the cause, I realized that unless I was willing to go around and basically remove everything and replace it, I wasn't going to be able to solve those little wee tiny gaps. If it was kind of a one-off sort of thing, maybe a gap here and a gap there, it probably wouldn't have bothered me so much. But the fact that it was so consistent throughout the entire shape, throughout this entire section of the ship, ultimately kind of undermined the whole thing for me. Even after I got it all done and I was looking at it and I got everything to line up the way that it had to in all of the important ways, specifically talking about the opening for the hangar, I just really wasn't satisfied with it, and I was trying to figure out how I could possibly fix that situation short of basically finishing the shape on the front section and then replacing the one on the back section with a newly copied and pasted version of the front section that was complete, including the side, and then basically the equivalent of cutting open a hole for the hangar. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized, rather than taking that approach, the difficulty with that approach of taking it from the front, finishing off the front section, and then taking the whole thing and cutting and pasting it again to the back, is that it would be kind of challenging to line up with the hanger, which would mean what I would most likely end up doing is removing the hanger, placing the new structure that was complete, and then placing a new hanger, which would kind of throw the whole thing out of whack in terms of making sure that we were using that space in the ship to the best of our ability. I've mentioned previously, when it comes to using the interior of the ship, I'm not especially concerned about using up every conceivable space and having everything line up perfectly. But for something like having the hangar line up with everything else that's currently around the hangar, it just seemed like I wanted a better solution, I guess would be the best way to describe it. It would have been a solution. It would have been viable. It wouldn't have been that big of a deal if the hangar didn't line up as well with the second version as it did with the first version with all the other things. And then I realized, rather than taking this whole section that we've been working on and removing it and replacing it with the finished version of the front section and resizing it and getting the hangar to fit and all that other stuff, I could finish the front section, take just the part that I added from where it is now, and include only the blocks that I used to finish it on the side, take that section and then resize it so that it fit on top of this profile here. And if we could make that work, if we could pull that off, you can see very specifically, see those little lines, those black lines there? That's what I was talking about with the hairline cracks. If you hadn't seen it up till now, that's your best possible view of what I'm referring to, is those hairline cracks along all of those rows. If we could just take that finished section on the outside of the profile and use that to finish off this section, that would probably be the happy middle ground. It wouldn't necessarily be easy to take that section from the front, copy and paste it, and resize it so it fit on the rear profile, but we could make it fit because the rear profile hasn't really been changed since we cut and pasted. So it would just be a matter of getting it set to the proper size by resizing it so that it fits properly over the existing profile. We don't have to worry about modifying anything. We don't have to worry about removing anything and replacing it. That ended up to me as what seemed like the best solution to the problem, was to just get after it, fix it, get it to work the way that we wanted it to work, and then move on with our lives. So you can see here, we finished the front section. We've got the back section here, the part that we just finished doing, removed it, cut and paste the piece from the front, and now it's just a matter of getting this piece here to line up with the profile of the back section that we had originally cut and paste from the front. And it's not very easy. It's not very easy at all. One of the things that I found is very, very helpful in a case like this is to not immediately think of it in the context of how we're going to make the whole thing match the entire profile, because it's a very large profile, and in order to be able to see it, you have to zoom out quite a ways, which makes it very difficult to tell if you're lined up properly or not. There's usually going to be a certain amount of difference. There's going to be a bit of an offset that's very difficult to see when you're zoomed out so far that you can see the entire thing. So rather than trying to match the entire shape, that entire perimeter of this profile, it's easier to pick one block and have that block line up with its counterpart like this. You see, we trying to get everything to line up in the first place. It didn't even want to let us place it. But after we kind of started focusing on one block and getting everything to line up with that one block, then all of a sudden it would let us place it and we could try and make everything fit. This isn't the perfect solution, but it's a lot easier because you can zoom in and you can see whether the block that you're trying to place, that's part of a larger collection of blocks, lines up with the block that it's supposed to attach to, which on its own is part of a larger collection of blocks. So we start off looking at that one block that we're working with. We select it as the block that we want to line up with, and then we kind of get into a situation where we line it up as best we can with that one block, and then we place it, and then we take a look at whether or not it lined up the way that we would like it to be lined up. And if not, Control Z to take a step back, remove the piece that we just placed, try it again. Does it have to be a little bit taller, a little bit shorter, a little bit wider, a little bit narrower, to the side, one side or the other a little bit, up or down a little bit? a lot of adjusting and a lot of trial and error, because again, it's just the size and not being able to really get the whole thing on the screen and have the kind of fine control and the ability to see whether or not it's lined up precisely. Ultimately, I wound up with something that was close enough that I could live with it. It's a little bit off in a couple of key areas, but in a way that I could easily pass off as just a cosmetic detail, just a little bit of a ridge here and there. Overall, the shape is pretty well lined up and it's doing just fine, and I'm very happy because it took quite a while. First of all, identifying the problem, that the issue was the cutting and the pasting and the resizing that created the gaps in the first place, and then realizing that we had a number of different potential solutions, picking one, then making it work. And now all we're doing is we're making sure that the hangers work. And these are zero tolerance for overlap. I discovered in this process, anything that overlaps any part of the hanger will cause the hanger to show that red box that indicates that it's not going to work. The fighters aren't going to be able to get in and out. So I'm very glad that I took a moment while we were finishing off this particular part of the ship to figure out, first of all, whether or not the hanger was going to work. And in this case, finding out it wasn't going to work so that we could make the adjustments now, get it set up so that it's going to work, so that when we move on, we don't have to worry about it. It's done. The hanger's done. This profile is done. We can move on to the detailing. We can get into something that's a little bit different. And by different, I mean interesting. I mean, I didn't mind this process necessarily. It's a bit of problem solving, which I enjoy. It's a bit of taking a look at things that I hadn't really taken a look at before, specifically the resizing and the copying and the pasting and the getting things to line up with those specific tools. That was okay. It was when it got into the repetitious process of tweaking, placing, examining, adjusting, placing again. That's where it got a little bit time consuming and a little bit repetitive, but it's done. And I'm glad that I invested the time. It wasn't, I wasn't, you know, celebrating the joy of the process, but I am very happy with the outcome. And that's kind of part of the process, I guess, is sometimes you're doing things that not necessarily thrilling to do, but the outcome in this particular case, I think, was worthwhile. And one of the things that I wanted to do in terms of detailing was spend a little bit of time on these side pieces. We've spent all of this time creating the profile, cutting and pasting the profile, getting everything to line up, getting everything to work. I wanted to make sure that the end result reflected the amount of time and effort that we put into it, which meant a little bit more detail work, a little bit more effort, just to kind of not necessarily change the way that you look at the entire structure, but just to give a little bit of emphasis in certain key areas with the detailing, just to add that little bit extra that kind of defines between a very straightforward and potentially dull shape and, you know, part of the ship, and create something that's a little bit more involved, a little bit more interesting. Your eye can sort of rest on it for a little while you kind of soak in all of the detail and make sense of it and all of those other things, and then you move on to something else. It's that very fine balance between interesting enough to make someone want to look at it and so gaudy that that's all they can ever see. So trying to find that balance. And in this case, you can see I'm doing something basically with just sticks and placing them vertically and spaced a certain way, and then placing them horizontally. And then you can see in the middle there, we put some slightly larger ones just to kind of break it up. They're not all the same size. Go back with some vertical ones. And then I decided to go for sort of like the circuit board kind of look, certain shape that you might kind of look at and see as either plumbing or a circuit or something of that nature, just to break things up a little bit. And in this case, you can see it starts off by placing these individual pieces that are staggered and then placing the horizontal pieces to make things look a certain way. And I realized it was every other piece that lined up properly. So we removed the ones that weren't lining up, added some more vertical sections, took out the stuff that didn't want to line up, and the end result is something that has that sort of circuit board look. And then just sort of filling in the last bit of detail with these pieces here. And then finally, because we hadn't done enough in this one little area, once we sort of ran out of space to continue adding these strips, I started putting some slopes on them so that they look sort of like fins on a vent, and sort of did a bunch the vertical, and then we did with the horizontal, same size and shape for the fins, just flipping them horizontal and then back this way doing the vertical, just to kind of make things look interesting. And then I decided to do some experiments with the paint. And I'm not saying that what you're seeing here is the end-all be-all, that everything is going to be the final color, but it's that experimentation. You put it in place, you leave it for a little while, see how you feel about it. If you don't like it after a couple of days or whatever, then you change it and end up with something that you're happy with. So that's what we'll be focusing on for the next episode, is more detailing, paint, experimentation, and finishing details to get this ship basically ready for a blueprint. And then we'll be doing the reveals. So this one's just about done. It's been a while, but I think that it's been a productive while, and we've got a lot accomplished. I'm really happy with the look of the ship, and I think with the right kind of details, it's just going to improve. So that will be the next episode. If you want to be notified about that episode, the easiest way to do that is to subscribe to my channel or follow me on social media. Links for social media are always in the information section below the video. Feel free to leave your comments and feedback. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.